My parents called me a disappointment during my graduation speech. For 18 years, I was a ghost in my own home, a footnote in the grand, glittering story of my older sister, Vanessa. My parents were the authors of that story, and Vanessa was their flawless protagonist. I was the poorly sketched background character, necessary for contrast but otherwise ignored. They were a family of artists, a world of vibrant colors, dramatic brushstrokes, and passionate declarations. My father was a moderately successful sculptor, my mother a respected art curator. Vanessa, their masterpiece, was a painter whose talent was undeniable, a fiery, beautiful whirlwind who commanded every room she entered. And I, Chloe, was quiet. I was the child who preferred books to paint, numbers to charcoal. I was practical, organized, and analytical in a family that valued chaotic, flamboyant creativity above all else. My quiet nature was seen not as a personality trait, but as a defect, a disappointing lack of the artistic fire that defined them. While Vanessa's canvases, no matter how amateurish in the beginning, were framed and hung in places of honor, my perfect report cards were met with a cursory nod and a quick change of subject. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say, her eyes already scanning the room for Vanessa. "But have you seen the way your sister has captured the light in her latest piece?" The neglect was a constant, dull ache, but the cruelty was sharp and targeted, and it almost always came from Vanessa. She was the golden child, and she played the part with sadistic glee, knowing she had our parents' unwavering adoration as her shield. She would mock my clothes, my friends, my interests. She'd accidentally spill paint on my homework, dismiss my achievements as boring, and tell our parents I was being moody or difficult when I was simply trying to exist. The worst incident, the one that finally severed what little bond we had, happened when I was 16. I had won a prestigious statewide mathematics competition, a victory that meant the world to me. It came with a small scholarship and a plaque. I came home, my heart soaring, and found my parents and Vanessa in the studio, fawning over her latest painting. I held up my plaque, my voice trembling with a desperate need for them to see me. Just this once. Vanessa took one look at it, snatched it from my hands, and let out a derisive laugh. "A math prize? How utterly beige," she sneered. "You're like a human calculator, Chloe. So predictable." She tossed the plaque onto a table cluttered with paint tubes, where it landed with a pathetic clatter. My father just chuckled and ruffled her hair. Now, Nessa," he said fondly. "Be nice to your sister. She can't help being methodical." I fled to my room that night, the humiliation a hot poker in my chest. 2 years later, when I left for college on a full academic scholarship to study finance, they didn't even throw me a farewell dinner. Vanessa was having a gallery opening that weekend, and that, of course, took precedence. For the next 10 years, I built a life for myself on the other side of the country, a life that was meticulously, gloriously beige. I became a financial analyst. I had a small but lovely apartment, a job I excelled at, a close-knit group of friends, and a quiet, stable happiness that they would never have understood. Our communication was minimal, stilted phone calls on birthdays and holidays where my parents would give me a brief, uninterested summary of my accomplishments before spending the next 20 minutes regaling me with every minute detail of Vanessa's soaring career. She was taking the art world by storm, a darling of the critics, her paintings selling for astronomical sums. I was genuinely happy for her success, in a distant, abstract way. But I was happier for my freedom. Then, on a Tuesday morning in October, my carefully constructed peace was shattered by a phone call. It was my mother, her voice a frantic, hysterical mess I hadn't heard before. "Chloe, you need to come home," she sobbed. "It's Vanessa. She's sick. She's very, very sick." The world tilted. Despite everything, a primal fear gripped me. "What is it? What's wrong?" "It's her kidneys," my mother choked out. "They're failing. Chloe, she's an end-stage renal failure. She needs a transplant or she's going to die." I was on a plane the next day, a knot of dread and confusion tightening in my gut. I found my family not in a sterile hospital waiting room, but in the opulent living room of their sprawling home, which now doubled as Vanessa's sick bay. Vanessa was lying on a plush chaise lounge, looking pale and drawn, but no less regal. My parents hovered around her, their faces etched with a grief so profound it seemed to suck all the air from the room. The reunion was surreal. There were no real hugs, no expressions of gratitude for me dropping my life to fly across the country. My mother's first words to me were, "We've all been tested. Your father, me, even your uncle. None of us are a match." She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a terrifying, desperate hope. "Chloe, you're our last chance." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. They hadn't called me for comfort or support. They had summoned me as a potential organ donor. Over the next few days, the situation unfolded with a grotesque sense of entitlement. They explained that Vanessa's condition, a rare autoimmune disease, had destroyed her kidneys with shocking speed. She was on the official transplant list, but the wait could be years, and her health was declining rapidly. A living donor was her only real hope for a future. The assumption that I would donate, that I would offer up a piece of my body to the sister who had treated me with nothing but contempt, was unspoken but absolute. It was framed as my duty, my chance to finally do something meaningful for the family. I was torn. A part of me, the part that was still that 16-year-old girl desperate for their love, felt a knee-jerk sense of obligation. But the woman I had become, the woman who had built a life on logic and self-respect, was screaming in protest. Still, I couldn't just say no. Not yet. I agreed to get tested, a decision driven by a complex mix of buried familial duty, a basic sense of human decency, and a small, dark part of me that wanted to hold this power over them, just for a little while. The test took a week. During that time, I stayed in my childhood bedroom, which had been perfectly preserved, a museum of my own insignificance. My math plaque was nowhere to be seen. The family's behavior was a masterclass in manipulation. My mother would bring me tea, her hands trembling, and talk about how she couldn't bear to lose her brilliant, vibrant girl. My father would corner me in the hallway, his voice low and intense, telling me how this was my chance to make things right, though what I had ever done wrong remained a mystery. Vanessa herself was the worst. She would summon me to her side, her voice weak, but her commands as sharp as ever. She spoke of the transplant not as a life-saving gift, but as a foregone conclusion. After the surgery, she'd say, waving a dismissive hand, "We'll have to find a way to make it up to you. Daddy's thinking of setting up a little trust fund for you. Something to help you with your little life." The condescension was so profound, so ingrained, that I don't think she even realized she was doing it. The call came on a Friday. I was a perfect match. The relief that washed over my family was tidal. My mother wept with joy. My father clapped me on the back with a forced, hearty enthusiasm. They immediately launched into planning mode, talking to surgeons, scheduling appointments, discussing recovery times. They didn't ask me how I felt. They didn't ask if I was scared. They didn't even really ask if I was still willing. I had become a vessel, a means to an end, a walking, talking medical supply. That night, they held a family meeting to discuss the terms of my donation, as if it were a business transaction. We sat around the large oak dining table, the same table where my achievements had been ignored for years. My father, in his element, started talking about the money they were prepared to offer me. "We want to be generous, Chloe. We're prepared to pay off your apartment, your car, and give you a lump sum. Enough to make you comfortable for the rest of your life." The offer was so crass, so utterly tone-deaf, that I felt a cold, hard anger begin to crystallize in my chest. They thought they could buy my forgiveness. They thought they could purchase my body part. Vanessa, propped up by pillows at the head of the table, sealed her own fate. She looked at me, a faint, pitying smile on her lips. "Well, it's the least we can do," she said, her voice dripping with her old, familiar disdain. "After all, you've never really had to deal with real pressure. It must be nice, having such a simple, uncomplicated life. This is probably the most important thing you'll ever do." The room went silent. My parents looked at her, then at me, a flicker of apprehension in their eyes. But they said nothing. They never said anything. And in that moment, 10 years of suppressed pain, of swallowed anger, of silent screams, coalesced into a single, unshakable point of clarity. I looked at their faces. My mother's desperate hope, my father's arrogant certainty, my sister's cruel condescension, and I realized that they would never change. This gift, this profound, life-altering sacrifice, would not fix them. It would not make them love me. It would only reinforce their belief that I existed to serve their needs. I stood up, my movements calm and deliberate. I looked at each of them, my gaze steady. And then I delivered the single word that would detonate their world. "No." The immediate aftermath of that one-syllable word was pandemonium. For a moment, there was just stunned silence, as if their brains couldn't process the input. Then, the eruption. "What did you say?" my father bellowed, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. "No," I repeated, my voice quiet but unyielding. "I'm not doing it." Vanessa was the first to find her voice, a shrill, incredulous shriek. "You can't. You're a perfect match. You have to." "I don't have to do anything," I said, looking directly at her. "It's my body, Vanessa. And my answer is no." My mother burst into tears, not tears of grief, but of impotent rage. "How can you be so selfish? So cruel? This is your sister's life we're talking about. After everything we've done for you." The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of that statement almost made me laugh. "Everything you've done for me?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You mean ignore me for 18 years? You mean stand by while your perfect daughter bullied and belittled me at every turn? You mean the graduation speech where you publicly called me a disappointment? What exactly should I be grateful for? My father slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. That's enough. This isn't about the past. This is about saving your sister. You will go through with the surgery, or you will no longer be a part of this family. The threat was so laughably empty. I hadn't been a part of their family for a decade. I'm not a part of this family now, I said, my voice finally breaking free of its calm facade. You only remembered I existed when you needed a spare part. You don't want a daughter. You want a donor. And you can't have one. I turned and walked out of that room, out of that house, and out of their lives for good. The sound of Vanessa's hysterical sobbing followed me out the door, but for the first time in my life, it brought me no pain. It brought me nothing at all. I flew back to my beige apartment, my quiet life, and my chosen family of friends who had been frantically texting me, worried about my silence. I told them everything. They wrapped me in a cocoon of support, validating my decision and reminding me that I was not a monster. I was a survivor. But the guilt was a tenacious parasite. In the quiet hours of the night, I would lie awake, torturing myself with the what-ifs. What if she died? Would her death be on my hands? Was I really the selfish, cruel person they had accused me of being? My therapist, a kind and practical woman, was my anchor in that storm. Chloe, she said to me during one particularly difficult session, this was never just about a kidney.
It was about your autonomy.
It was about your right to say no to people who have hurt you. Your refusal wasn't an act of murder. It was an act of self-preservation.
Her words were a lifeline.
I clung to them as my family unleashed their fury. They started a vicious smear campaign against me on social media. My mother wrote a long, tear-soaked post about her heartless daughter who was letting her sister die out of petty jealousy. Vanessa, from her sickbed, posted artistic, black and white photos of herself looking tragically beautiful, with captions about betrayal and the cruelty of family. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years started calling me, leaving voicemails calling me a monster, telling me I would burn in hell. I blocked their numbers, deleted my social media accounts, and retreated into my own life. News of their world trickled in through a sympathetic cousin, the only family member who had reached out to check if I was okay. Vanessa's health was in a steep decline. My parents, in their panic, were throwing their considerable fortune at the problem. They were trying to use their connections and their wealth to push her up the official transplant list, a morally bankrupt and largely fruitless endeavor. They hired consultants, made donations to hospitals, and flew Vanessa to different specialists, all while the medical bills mounted into the stratosphere. Months passed. My life found its quiet rhythm again. The guilt slowly receded, replaced by a profound, unshakable sense of peace. I had chosen myself. I had survived. Then one day, my cousin called. Vanessa had gotten a kidney. A young man had died in a motorcycle accident, and his family had donated his organs. Vanessa was a match. The surgery had been rushed, and it was complicated. The relief I felt was immediate and overwhelming. I had never wanted her to die. I just wanted her out of my life. But the relief was short-lived. My cousin called again a week later. There had been major complications. Vanessa's body was rejecting the new organ. She had developed a severe infection. She had survived the surgery, but she was facing a lifetime of dialysis, further surgeries, and a severely compromised quality of life. The family's finances were in ruins. The money they had squandered trying to buy her a place in line, combined with the astronomical cost of her post-transplant care, had bled them dry. My father had to sell his studio. My mother had to auction off pieces from her private art collection. Vanessa's brilliant career was over. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my apartment, the afternoon sun streaming through the window. I felt no joy, no sense of victory, no satisfaction in their downfall. All I felt was a somber, quiet sense of justice. Karma, I realized, wasn't a lightning bolt of revenge. It was just the slow, inevitable harvest of the seeds you had sown. They had cultivated a world built on cruelty, entitlement, and the idea that love was conditional, that people were disposable. And in the end, that world had collapsed in on itself. A few months later, a letter arrived, forwarded by my cousin. The handwriting was shaky, almost unrecognizable. It was from Vanessa. Chloe, it began. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me.
I just need to say it.
You were right. You were right about everything. Lying here day after day, hooked up to machines, I've had a lot of time to think. I think about that math plaque. I think about how scared you must have been.
I was a monster to you.
I was a monster because I was adored and you were not, and it made me feel powerful. I took their love and I weaponized it against you. And when I needed you, when my life was on the line, I still saw you as something less than me, something that existed to serve my purpose. My life is quiet now. All the color is gone, and in the silence, all I can hear is the truth.
I am sorry.
I know it's too late. I know it means nothing. But I'm sorry. I read the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. She was right. It was too late. But it wasn't meaningless. It was the final, quiet closing of a chapter one had been trying to finish my entire life. My own life continues to be beautifully, wonderfully beige. It is filled with the quiet joy of a stable career, the warmth of true friendship, and the peace that comes from knowing, deep in your bones, that you are enough. I am not a hero. I am not a monster. I am simply a woman who was asked to set herself on fire to keep someone else warm, and I chose to walk away from the flame.